Hello to all. Good evening. And I'm very happy to see you all, and especially to see Karen Klinert Carlson. She's a speaker of this evening, and she's a person who has a very, very interesting history, family history. But before that, I have to say she is a sociologue. She's coming from USA, and perhaps Karen, you will speak a little bit at the beginning about your field of work before, but now being older, she is really very engaged to discover a family story, and by family story, always reflecting what it makes with me and what it means for society. And so, a very warm welcome this evening, Karen, and I'm sure we will be very excited to hear what you have discovered, and perhaps we also will have some reflections after, individually or together, how we can do to make known and to research about our family story. Thank you
Thank,
for coming.
thank you, Carmen. Thank you for having me. Thank you, everyone, for joining and being interested in hearing my story and my message. And I've known Carmen now for several years, and it's been my pleasure. She has so many interesting projects, always helping other people, and it makes my heart sing to be your friend. Thank you. So I'm going to talk about what family story has to do with engagement, civic engagement, democracy, and anti-racism. And through my family story, how Einstein saved my family and really changed my life. So I have a few goals for today. I'm going to share some of my family history. I'm going to talk about how rescue and migration forces you to build a new identity. We'll reflect together on ways that family trauma affects future generations of families, including our own, and in the environment that we're in today, how we really must stand up for civil engagement, democracy, and anti-racism. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about who I am through story, through pictures. So at the top, you have me with my husband, Don. He's from Honduras, so we're very multicultural. I was a professor, you see me in my robes for many years. I am also a German citizen. I'm a German citizen and a US citizen. Down below, the picture with the passport, you see me with my husband's family. Oops, excuse me. And so they are Black, Latino, and Filipino, all mixed. In the bottom two, you see me speaking in Serbia and in Germany, because I talk to a lot of students in high schools and gymnasiums. You see a big picture of Chicago. That's where I live. And the top, you see the Ulm Munster. That's where my mother was from. And my father was Serbian, so from Zranjanin, and actually from a village called Lukishevo. And in the bottom, you see me with my 2 daughters and my 5 grandchildren. And I'm doing this for them. So growing up, I really had no idea that the Holocaust had anything to do with me or my family. And so I started to do research, and I found that some people like me grow up in what we call a culture of silence, where their parents don't tell them anything about their background. It's as if they just plopped on earth. My father came to the US, and when I was born, he was 43 years old. He could have been my grandfather. And I had no idea of his life before. All I knew is that he was an orphan and he had absolutely no family whatsoever. And I knew my mother came from Ulm, Germany, which was some kind of magical place where only good things happened. So here are my parents. There's my mother, Annalisa Hirsch, and my father, Armin Glinert. And he was a doctor who studied in Vienna. in our house, my mother thought it was so important to be German. Now, remember, the United States fought a war against Germany. And she thought it was so much more important to talk about being German than to tell her true identity, which I only learned when I was 18, that she was Jewish, 100%. But I grew up not knowing this. So we ate German food, we ate Spätzle, we ate Wiener Schnitzel, we had Umspatz in the house, we had Steins, we had pictures of the Munster. I mean, I knew nothing about her history at all, really. When I was 13 years old, I got this letter. It came in this envelope. It was addressed to me, Miss Karen Glinert, typewritten. And on it, there was a stamp with Albert Einstein, and it said first day of issue. And it was stamped Princeton, New Jersey, March 14th, 1966. I learned later that was Einstein's birthday. And so I said to my mom, why did I get this letter? And when I opened it, it was empty. There's nothing inside. So I get this anonymous letter. At which point, now I'm 13, my mom said, oh, well, when I came to the United States, I lived with Albert Einstein. He was my mother's first cousin. Let's put it in the strongbox in the desk. One day you'll be happy to have this. And she put it away, closed her mouth, and wouldn't say one more word. And that's all I knew. But somehow I was related to somebody who my mother lived with, who was famous enough to get a stamp named after him. And he was one of the most famous people in the world. And my mother was so shy about it, she wouldn't talk about it. So I ask you, what do you think of when you see this picture? And people can talk. I'm a teacher. What do you think of?
Einstein, physics.
Einstein,
E equals
physics,
MC
science.
squared.
E equals MC squared. What else do you think of?
Well, that's one of the most famous formulas that he's famous for.
That's true.
That's the transformation of energy into mass and vice versa.
Right.
I have in mind his wife, Mileva Maric from Novi Sad, and how she actually done a huge impact on his ideas. Sorry, I appreciate him, but I also appreciate the ideas of his wife.
Yes, and we don't know how much she did of his proofs. I think quite a bit, actually. So, as we know, he was this very famous person. But for me, he was a lot more because he was also a great humanitarian. I'm sorry about the typo. I don't know how that happened. But without Albert Einstein, I probably would not have been born, because what I've learned is that the family that Albert Einstein did not help in Ulm all went to either Theresienstadt or Riga or different camps, and they all died. Nobody survived. So I owe my life basically to Albert Einstein. So my mom, in 1997, she said, I want you to come to Ulm with me for a reunion. And there were like 150 people that came to Ulm, and they sponsored us all. These were the former Jewish citizens of Ulm. And she could not talk about her background. She just couldn't talk about her history at all. So I think she invited me because she wanted me to hear from other people about maybe what she had gone through. Somebody else to carry her water, kind of just the way we say it in English. But and then from there, I was invited again in 2004 to this big 125th birthday celebration of Albert Einstein. And they only invited 6 relatives, and my mother was one of them. So we were like celebrities almost. And I was like, it was so hard for me to understand because my mother never said anything. And then I came in Ulm again in 2012 when they rebuilt the synagogue. And I started staying in touch with historians and different people. I made some friends. And so then in 2018, I had retired from being a professor, and I got an invitation to come to Ulm to talk about Einstein and my family. But to be honest with you, I didn't know a lot. And I was a professor, so I had to learn, and I didn't want to make a fool of myself. So I came to Ulm with photo albums. My mother saved all these letters. They were all in German. I didn't speak any German. So I had like 100 letters, and I had her diaries, her Tagebuch, from the time she was 12 years old till 18. So Hitler came to power in 1933 in January. My mother was 12 years old, and she left Germany in 1939, August, the end of August. While she was on the ship, Germany marched into Poland. So you can kind of understand that these were her diaries, and I knew there was something in them, but I could not understand it. And to back up a little, so I told you my parents didn't tell me anything about my background. When I was in high school, a boy wanted to date me, and he said, "But I can only date Jewish girls. Are you Jewish?" And I said, "I don't know. I'll go home and ask my mother." I mean, isn't that crazy? And so I went home and I said, "I want to go out with this boy. I really like him and he likes me. But he can only date Jewish girls. Am I Jewish?" So my mother said, "Tell him you're half Jewish. Tell him your father is Jewish." So I'm so excited, and I go to school and I was like, "Hey, I'm Jewish, I'm half Jewish." Half is Jewish. And so the boy said, "I'm sorry, I can't date you. If I can't date you unless your mother is Jewish, then you're not really Jewish." So I was so upset, right? And then when I was 18 years old, on my 18th birthday, my parents sat me down. Oh, sorry. My parents sat me down, and they were so serious, and there was no food, and food was really important in our house. So my mother sat down, and my mother was always busy. She was never sitting, and she sat too. And my parents said, "Well, we have your birthday present. We want to talk to you about your identity. And we want you to know that you are actually 100% Jewish. Albert Einstein saved your mother. Albert Einstein saved your grandparents. And here are some articles that your grandfather wrote about their journey, their escape from Europe." And I didn't know what to do with it. I was so angry because first I didn't get to date any boys in high school. And they had kept my identity from me because they wanted to protect me, I think, but I didn't know why. So anyway, so I go to Ulm and I make this presentation. And so the question is, why did Einstein care about me or my family? Because he was my family. And my grandmother was his first cousin, just like his wife, Elsa, his second wife. And my great-grandmother and his father were brother and sister. So that's a pretty close relationship. And he helped us. I met Michael Moos. His father was my mother's favorite cousin, and he's just written a book about his family. I encourage you also to read it. This is Ingo Bergman from Ulm. He's now the mayor of a neighboring city, but he's the one that invited me. And this is my friend Annette Schmidt, and she was the moderator. And we learned about Einstein together, and Ingo helped me. He helped me translate the documents, and Stadt Ulm helped me, and he took me into the archives, and I just learned so much about who I was. And I actually think I stood two inches taller after that, because it was exciting to know that I was from people and important people. And so what did I learn? I learned that our family had a long history in Germany and the Weimar Republic, in the German Empire and the Weimar Republic. All the way back, this is a picture of me in the cemetery in Buchau. And this is the grave of Rebecca Einstein. She lived in 1759 to 1834, and she was the great-grandmother of Friederike and Hermann. Friederike was my great-grandmother, and Hermann was Einstein's father. And she was also the great-great-grandmother of Albert Einstein and my grandmother. And there are over 100 Einstein graves in Bad Buchau. And the house where they grew up is still standing. So in the 1870s, the Jews were finally allowed to live in Ulm. Before that, they couldn't live in big cities. They could only live in little villages, and they were half citizens or not citizens at all. And the laws changed. So beginning in 1871, Jews were allowed to live in Ulm. And so Adolf Moos, who was married to Friederike Einstein, my great-grandmother, and he was born in Kappel, which is right next to Buchau. He fought to become a citizen of Ulm, and he was granted citizenship in 1886. And this was a very big deal for a Jewish family. And he was a merchant, and the Moos family had a long history as merchants. And this is an advertisement from his store in 1887, and this is in the museum, actually. My great-grandfather, Moritz Hirsch, who came from Wankheim, he sailed to America with his brother when he was 14 years old and lived in Tennessee during this American Civil War. And he hated America, but he stayed long enough to become a citizen. And then he went back after 20 years, and he married Anna Moos, another Moos. The Hirsches, the Mooses, and the Einsteins intermarried all the time. I don't know why. I'm lucky that it didn't affect my intelligence. But this was the store that he started on Hafengasse. And this is currently, for those of you who know Ulm, this is the Mark Cain store today. So I like to go in there just because it's the space where my grandparents had their store. And this is the house that my mother lived in. And this is on Neuter Straße. And for those of you who know, this is where Mueller is now building a big house. And it's kitty corner from where the Einstein Discovery Center will be. And this was bombed in the big bombing of December 1944. A couple of years ago, we were able to put Stolperstein there for my mother and her brother and her parents. This is a picture of my mother. My mother is the second from the right. And if you read the names, you can see that these were Christian and Jewish children, and they played together. So my mother here was 7 years old, and the children played together. They didn't care about religion. It wasn't important in 1928 at all. That came later. This is my mother and her older brother, Fritz. So Hitler comes to Germany in January of 1933, and suddenly their lives changed completely. The first thing Hitler did in the first 6 months that he came to power was he imprisoned people who opposed him. Anybody who didn't agree with him, particularly communists, socialists, clergies, anybody that was outspoken, he created concentration camps and deported them. And there's one in Ulm over Coburg, and also Dachau is very close by. It's like an hour's drive. So the first thing Hitler did was to go against his enemies. So he did not like Albert Einstein. And so Albert Einstein experienced a lot of discrimination and racism. He was passed over for the Nobel Prize 10 times because the committee did not want to give a Jew the Nobel Prize. And they said his science was Jewish science, and they didn't want to believe it. And even when he did get the Nobel Prize for 1921, they delayed 1 whole year and gave it to him in 1922, just because they weren't ready to give it to him. And when he did get it, he did not get it for the theory of relativity. He got it for the photoelectric effect and his contribution to science. So he experienced a lot of different racism. In 1929, a publishing house in Leipzig published a book, 100 Authors Against Einstein. And these 100 authors each wrote an essay about why you shouldn't trust Albert Einstein. Then in December of 1932, he was packing with his wife, Elsa, to go to America. He spent the winter term always in Southern California at Caltech for several years. He lectured there as a physicist, and he got a knock on the door, and there was a German officer, a Nazi, and he said, "Professor Einstein, I know you're going to America. We want you to know that you should not come back to Germany. Your life is not safe here." So Einstein and his wife left with 30 suitcases for 3-month term in America. And in the summer, he was on a poster, noch ungehängt, not yet hung. So this was an assassination list, and another scientist was killed that summer. And so he decided that he better believe the threat. So he wanted to come back to Germany, but he couldn't. So he first went to Belgium, and he was in Belgium with friends. And the Belgian government said, "Professor Einstein, we cannot protect you. There's no border that can protect you from an assassin. You're so close to Germany." So then he went to England, and he stayed with a friend in England on an estate, and it was guarded. And while he was there, he received an offer from the Institute for Advanced Studies at Princeton. Now, that is separate from Princeton University, because at the time, Princeton did not hire Jewish professors. So the Institute allowed him to be a free thinker, and he accepted the offer. And so he and his wife, Elsa, moved to Princeton, New Jersey. And that's how he ended up at Princeton. But he had faced a lot of discrimination. And that summer, he started trying to help people, relatives, friends, colleagues, to leave Germany. And he wrote to 50 important citizens in America, including the president's wife, President Roosevelt's wife, Eleanor. And he started an organization that's now called the International Rescue Committee. They still function. They were founded originally to help Jews leave Germany. But today they help people in Palestine. They help people all over the world. It's a wonderful organization because he believed that racism was the enemy. And when he came to Princeton, he saw that Princeton was very segregated and that Blacks were treated just like Jews were in Germany. And so he actually fought in civil rights in America. I find that to be just very impressive. He didn't have to do anything. He had his glory, he had his Nobel, but instead he worked for the common man. And he also, he never would ride to work with all the fancy people. He took the bus with the maids and the cleaning people. And he used to walk in Princeton and sit on people's porches, Black people. And he would invite children to come and do their homework with him when he had time. And so he was a great humanitarian. So while this was happening and he's in Princeton, the Jewish businesses were being boycotted in Ulm, and he heard about it. And that included my grandparents' businesses. And so my mother wrote in her diary in May of 1934. Today, I went to the Danube pool for the first time. The water was warm, the air was warm, and I swam with Lotte Strauss. That was her best friend. And we went on a short bike ride, and it was wonderful. So you can see she was a normal teenager and oblivious to what was going on. But it got worse for Jews. Jews were not welcome in Ulm. There were signs everywhere. Nazi spider flags. So just a few months later, that was May. Now this is August. She said, "How hot it is today. But I don't think I can go back to the pool in the Danube. Among the cruel people, they don't want me because I am Jewish. What can I do about that? But Hermie and Mr. Schallman have taught me how beautiful Judaism is. So I will be proud and happy to be Jewish and live for my Judaism." So what had happened is that on the Bodensee, there was a town, I'm blanking on the name now, but they invited a lot of Jewish children to learn about Judaism because they thought Jews were too secular and it was important to teach kids about their background. And so she stayed with the Schallmans. That's what that's about. And so she wrote in her diary that she needed to learn to laugh constantly over little, to be strong, to be brave, to be mature and stay pure, to have big thoughts and a pure heart, and to be devout. So here she is, 13 years old, and thinking these thoughts. And then she started reading. They read The Jewish State by Herzl. They talked about Zionism. In the afternoon, Hans Hirsch came from Stuttgart to integrate us into the German Jewish youth group. I am dreadfully sad and unhappy. I am completely despondent, and I don't know why. Today, we debated the difference between Zionism and the German youth group, the DJJ. Today, we saw a movie about Palestine. I thought German Jewish is wrong. At least the Zionists know what they're fighting for, a land of freedom and future. I dreamt of Palestine, but when I woke up, I'm still a German Jew. And then she says, today is my confirmation. I got 91 presents, just like a child, right? It was festive in the synagogue and no one got stuck, I guess, on their lines. And at the same time that she was being a little teenager, Einstein started to help his relatives. So this is a letter he wrote for Alfred Moos, that's Michael Moos's father, and he helped him first to emigrate to England and then to Palestine. And then in 1936, the Nuremberg laws stripped Jews of all their political and social rights, prohibited intermarriage, confiscated businesses, and at Easter of that year, the Jewish children were expelled from school. My mother was 15 years old, and she never went back to school. And I did not know that. I thought my mother had a college education. She was so brilliant. She could argue and talk politics or policy with anybody, but she never went to school after the age of 15. So what did she do? So this picture was in her photo album, and she always said this was her scout troop. And then Ingo Bergman wrote this memorial book, and the picture was on the cover. So it turns out I learned from other people that my mother became a teacher in the Jewish school. And some of the children there, who were older ladies now, told me that your mother taught me to read, write, and compute. And then when we couldn't join Hitler Youth, your mother took us skiing and skating and cycling and all kinds of sporting adventures. And she was our teacher and our mentor. So my mother never talked about this, but that's what she did. And many of those children died in the Holocaust. Here in her diary, she writes that she's wandering Ulm and she has a feeling of departure and great loss, overwhelming sadness. And she will never forget Ulm and her Danube and the Trommelweise, and she will always carry it in her heart. And so it was really sad. Then came the Pogromnacht, and we just celebrated this yesterday, right? Yesterday and Sunday. And this in America, we call it Kristallnacht. In Germany, you call it Pogromnacht. And men were dragged out of their homes, marched nude in the fountain, beaten, and I think 18 men from Ulm that we were related to were sent to Dachau concentration camp. And the men who had served in World War I, they were allowed to leave after a month of imprisonment with the promise that they would leave Germany and give up whatever business they had, whatever money they had, they would just leave. And after that, that's when my grandparents wrote to Albert Einstein for help. And they decided my mother would leave first. So she writes in her diary, I am 18 and a half years old, and I'm soon emigrating alone, but I still have to produce my papers. A disgrace, actually, but you do it anyway. So the Jewish passports had a J on it, and I think it was embarrassing to her. There is no need to write that there was a 9th of November and that we are living in a terrible, gruesome time. I will never forget it. Nor do I need to stir up my feelings about Lotte no longer being here. Her best friend committed suicide. She was a wonderful swimmer. She swam into the water and she drowned herself. And she was 18 years old. So that was her very best friend. So it says, what does it stir up even? What will that wound ever be healed? It will be with me as long as I live. So it was decided that she would go to her cousin, Professor Albert Einstein in Princeton. It took a whole year for them to get it together. So finally, on September 1st, actually it was August 30th, she set sail. And it was the same day that the Nazis then invaded Poland on the 1st. By the time she got to America, they were at war. And my mother was first detained by the French policemen for 7 days. Now, can you imagine being 18 years old and being detained by the police? And she was interrogated. What did you see? Where are the soldiers? What did you see along the way? And then at the end of 7 days, they released her. And one of the French policemen fell in love with her. And here, this is her document. Says that she arrived September 7th. She was 18 years old. Her friend's name, meaning her sponsor, was Albert Einstein. She left from Le Havre and arrived in New York in Manhattan. And here it is on the microfiche. Doesn't want to turn. Okay. So a little after she got to America, she got a letter from that French policeman I told you that fell in love. And he said, by the time my letter reaches you, you will have reached the United States. Thousands of kilometers separate us. You made such an impression on me. What can I say? And now I will say it. Come what may, I will never forget you. I will always keep the memory of you deep in my heart as a pious feeling, and your gentle image will never fade from my eyes. After your departure last night, I was happy to see you again, but deeply sad to have left you. The next day, I wanted to run to the station and beg you to stay. But after considering all the difficulties you have due to your situation, I'm Jewish, which would have been made worse by current events, I understand that I should remain reasonable and wait for better days. I think I've done the right thing. And then he writes, very latest news. French radio reported today, September 1st at 5:45 a.m. Poland was attacked by German troops. In other words, this is the signal for war in Europe. France will honor her obligations to Poland, and all her sons will fight for the noble cause of freedom as our fathers did in 1914. You see, my dear little friend, it would have been insane to keep you here. What would have become of you? I dare not think about it. I do not know what my fate will be tomorrow. However, should tragedy prevent me from returning, you may be assured that I will have your sweet name on my lips before I die. Nobody ever sent a letter like that to me. So when my mother came to America and she arrived, America was not such a friendly place. She had no idea that there were Nazis in America. There had been a large pro-Nazi demonstration in Madison Square Garden just a few months before she arrived. And then the SS St. Louis came. It was not allowed to disembark in Cuba. And then the Americans wouldn't let it disembark. And more than 200 people were sent back to Europe. And most of them were killed because America would not open its doors to them. There was so much racism against Jews, and there were quotas. And she was just lucky because she had a famous sponsor. Then there were kinder transports helping little kids. Parents would put their kids on these transports knowing that they would never see them again. And they all went to concentration camps. The kids survived, but then America stopped allowing the kinder transports to come. And I read in one article that somebody in the cabinet of Roosevelt said, those little kids will just grow up to be dirty Jews, Jewish adults. I mean, there was so much racism. And so you had Charles Lindbergh and Father Coughlin, and you had all these people that were really big Nazis, Henry Ford. And so my mother decided to reinvent herself. She went from Annalisa to Anne. She burned her Einstein letters. She saved all these other letters, but she burned her Einstein letters because she was terrified of being associated with a famous Jew, the most famous Jew in the world, probably. This is the house that she went to. This is Einstein's house in Princeton. And Albert Einstein, this is my mother in a car. My mother got $200 to get started from Albert Einstein. And what did she do? She thought in America, a girl needs to be able to drive. So she got driving lessons, and Uncle Albert thought this was a waste of his money. But my mother, that car was really important to her. So then a year later, my grandparents finally found a way to leave. But by the time they left, the war was raging in France. So they got to go to Berlin, and from Berlin, they went to Moscow. And before they went to Moscow, they were strip searched and only allowed the equivalent of $4 American to go on this long journey, 15,000-mile journey. So my grandfather took all the money they had and he bought cigars, and he used those cigars to barter as cash. And that helped save their lives, really. So they went from Ulm to Berlin, and then they took the Trans-Siberian Express train across Siberia to Manchuria, to Lake Baikal. They crossed the Manchurian border. They arrived at Harbin, China. They went to Manchukuo, to Korea. Then they departed for Japan by boat. They crossed land in Japan and went to the north of Japan to Kobe. And from Kobe, they sailed on the SS Grover Cleveland, and Einstein paid for their way. And when they arrived in America, there were reporters who found that Einstein was their sponsor, and they wanted to interview my grandmother, and it was a big deal. And at the same time, they were trying to get my mother's brother out, but they couldn't get him out. And Einstein put in his affidavits. He wrote so many affidavits for people, like legal letters, to help them, to be sponsors, to be their sponsor, that it got stuck in the bureaucracy and they became worthless. So he was actually arrested by the Gestapo, my uncle Ernst, Fritz. And just as they were going to board him on this train to Auschwitz with his boss, he said, "You can't arrest me. I'm an American. And I have a very famous relative, Albert Einstein." And he convinced the Nazis that that citizenship, this is the citizenship of paper of my grandfather, of my great-grandfather. He said, "Oh, well, you know, the citizenship in America is passed from the grandfather to the father to the son, and I'm the son. So I'm now a citizen of America." It wasn't true, but they didn't know. And he somehow sold the story, and they put him in a POW camp for Americans. And he was there for like 2 years. And here he is in the prison camp with these American soldiers. And then he was, there was a prisoner exchange in 1944, German soldiers for American soldiers. And when the Americans came, they said, "But you're not an American." And so they sent him to Phillipsville in Algiers to a displaced persons camp. But it saved his life. And then Einstein sponsored him and paid for his way as well. And so Einstein had to show, and so first Uncle Fritz said, "I met a girl and I'd like you to sponsor her too." And Einstein said he would only sponsor them if they got married. And he had to provide proof of his income, his position. The Institute of Advanced Studies had to write letters. His bank had to show how much money he had. And this way, if he would come to America and couldn't make it, Einstein was responsible. But Einstein did this for his family. So it says, "Leave Algiers for New York via Philadelphia." And they made it. And so when he was released, Einstein says, "It is a miracle. Es ein Wunder." So then they had new beginnings. This is my grandparents and my mother in the United States. Einstein helped my grandfather get his first job. And so he created, remember I told you my parents gave me these articles that my grandfather had written about his flight from Germany. It was 5 segments in the San Francisco News. And that's how they got their first money. And he then refused payment. My grandparents tried to pay him back. And he said, "That was the best spent money. I will not take a penny, and I don't want to hear about it anymore." Then my mother got married. She married this German guy, Fred Rosendahl. And Einstein writes that, "I was very happy about the visit of Anneliese and her wonderful husband. He looks like a robust leftover from the Maccabee times, like a solid rock. My very best regards to you." And now he's signing it Albert, not Einstein. So they became close. But unfortunately, my mother's first husband died when she was only 27 years old. So she became a widow. He was strong like a Maccabee, but he had a heart attack and he died. And so the lady on the right, on the bottom, that was her mother-in-law. That was Fred's wife, mother rather. And she said, "Anneliese, you're too young to be alone. You need to get married again." And I have a friend who knows a doctor from Yugoslavia who was in camp with him, and he's coming to New York, and I think you should meet. And that's how my parents met. So her mother-in-law fixed them up. And my father fell head over heels for my mom. He proposed on the first date, but it took her 6 months to say yes. So then 1 year later, I was born. And there I am with my grandfather. And there are my parents. So I have spent since, I've gone to Ulm many times, 1977, 1997, 2004, 2012, 2018. I told you that. But I also found a document my father wrote in a desk, in that same desk where the Einstein stamp was put. I found this letter that my father wrote in 1960. Now, he had already been dead 40 years, and it had dates and places of my dad's life. And so when we were invited to Ulm, I asked, would it be okay if we stay in Europe longer? And I started tracing my father too. And so we didn't just go to Ulm, but then we went to Vienna, we went to Budapest, we went to Pécs, where my grandmother was from. We went to Serbia, and we started doing research. And all these miracles kept happening. It's almost as if like God sent these people in my path, because most people who try to find things don't find very much, but we had a lot of luck. And so we went for 1 month in 2018, in 2 months in 2019. We came for 4 months in 2021 and ended up staying a year and a half. We came in 2023 for 6 weeks. Then when the museum opened last year, we stayed for 6 months in Ulm, but we did research in other countries too. And I just got back from Ulm last week. And what I've learned so much, and I've made so many wonderful relations in all these different places. That next year, they're going to put Stolperstein in Vienna for the aunt and uncle that helped my father go to medical school. And in Serbia, they just approved that they're going to put Stolperstein for my grandmother and my father.
In Zrenjanin or?
In Zrenjanin. Yes, in Zrenjanin. They found the place where his office was and his house and where his mother lived. And so, yes, I'm very excited about it. And I hope it'll probably be August 18th. They always do a big commemoration on August 18th because that's when the people were deported. And my grandmother was deported. And so she was killed. There were different stories. The first story was that she was killed in Novi Sad in the Razzia. Then the person who put her on the list said, oh, that wasn't true. And he put me in touch with another professor who said, no, she was probably killed in a gas van in Saimaste. And then the Serbians also found a document that said she was killed in the synagogue. And the women that were killed in the synagogue were made to be prostitutes. So it's not a very pretty story, but that's probably what happened to my grandmother. So Einstein helped a lot of our relatives. And so a lot of people got out, but those he couldn't help, as I said, they died pretty much. And I found family. We went to 14 different countries. I found relatives in Israel. The couple there, her father was my father's first cousin. This older lady in the blue sweater, she was my mother's cousin. This is another cousin in Israel and his family. And I found family in England now and in Australia. So, and in South Africa as well. So it's pretty exciting because when I was growing up and we had our Thanksgiving dinners, it was mom, dad, Bobby, and me. That was it. And so now I have all this family. It's very exciting. But while my father was in camp and my mother was in America, a lot of people were lost. And so I just want to highlight what I found because it's pretty sad. This is about my father, where he talks about that he lost his entire family in Zemun concentration camp. This is Ilka Glinert, was my grandmother. And so this is the women being lined up to be deported. This is the boat that took them to Belgrade. Here the men were hung in the street in Zrenjanin. This is Saimaste. It was the old campground. This van was the gas van where they would put people in the van, tell them they were being moved, and then they would put on the gas and then dump the bodies. Uncle Solomon and Aunt Bertha went on the Kladovo transport from Vienna. And when they got to the Iron Gate at the border between Romania and Serbia, they were stopped and they were made to spend the winter there. And then the Germans came, and the uncle, Solomon, was shot in the forest, and she was sent to Saimaste, and the little boy was lost. This is my father's first cousin, Richard. That's their son. He escaped to England. And when he got to England, he was arrested as an enemy alien, and he was sent to Australia on a ship called the Dunera, and he was imprisoned with Nazis. But then, because he spoke fluent German and he was very strong and smart, he had been a boxer. The English offered him to become a commando officer, and so he became like a spy. But unfortunately, he was killed at Normandy on June 7th, 1944. He was 21 years old. This is in Kupka. So in my father's, when I found his birth record and his parents' marriage record, said his father was born in Kupka. So we went to Kupka, which is now in the Ukraine, but it used to be Romania. And the lady with the babushka here with the brown coat, first we went and met with her, and she looked terrified when we came. And we went to a shop, and the shopkeeper said, she likes cookies. She likes those cookies. So we bought her all these cookies, and we asked her about the Abramovich family. And because my grandfather also used Abramovich, that was his father's name, but somehow he became Glenert. And there was a story about it being a religious ceremony, and the state didn't recognize the marriage, but I don't know if that's true. But somehow he used both names. And so when this lady was asked, she goes, Abramovich. And what we learned is that the city hall had been our family's home. And then they took us to this man with the little cap, and he starts crying when he meets me. And he's like, I'm so sorry. It's all my fault. What's your fault? The Romanian guard came in June of 1941, and they came with their rifles, and they found me in a haystack, and they shook me, and they said, where are the Jews? And I am so sorry. I was only 7, and I was terrified. And I pointed to Abramovich house, and they went over there, and they started shooting. And Abramovich had been in World War I, and he started shooting. And then they threw tear gas, and he came out coughing, and they shot him 100 times, and they beat him, and it's all my fault. So this man was carrying all this guilt for all these years. He had nothing to do with the murder of the family. And then the mayor takes us to a clearing in the woods and says, this is where the Jews were buried. It's a mass grave. And I checked with, there's Father Dubois, who has looked at all these different mass graves in the Ukraine, and they told me, yes, there are 15 bodies buried on the Abramovich farm, and I got the names. So that was my family, and that was in the Ukraine. So you can see this diaspora of killing was everywhere. This is Page. This is where my grandmother was born. 27 people in the Levy family were taken to Auschwitz in 1944 and killed. Robert Hirsch, my mother's uncle and the brother of Moritz, who started the store, he committed suicide after Kristallnacht. He was a famous lawyer. He just couldn't take it. Doesn't want to move. This is my grandfather's sister, Martha Walder, and she was deported from Riga to Riga from Berlin and shot in this forest. These are the Hirsches that were, in Tübingen, and they were also our cousins, and they were killed, except for the ones that got to South Africa. Some of them got to South Africa, and others went to Riga, and they were shot. This is my grandmother's brother, Ugo, and he did not think that the Nazis would come for him because he was this important businessman, but he was sent to Theresienstadt. He was killed. As soon as he died, his wife, Jenny, was sent to Auschwitz. I'm in trouble getting it to move. This is my mother's best friend that committed suicide, Lotte. Sophie Scholl was my mother's classmate in the Mädchenrealschule in Germany, and she gave me the book The White Rose. So she was a martyr, and I think most of you know the story of Hans and Sophie Scholl, but she was passing anti-Nazi leaflets out at the University of Munich. A janitor turned her in, and she and her brother and another young man were all beheaded within 3 days of being arrested. Many cousins of Albert Einstein were murdered in the Shoah. Lena Einstein, Bertha Hofheimer, Maria Wessel, Hugo Moss, Julius Moss, the family of Robert Einstein in Italy, Anna Steiner, they were all killed. So I thought the Holocaust had nothing to do with me. And as you can see, I was wrong. So what did Einstein do? You know, right now, we are feeling echoes of the 1930s in America and in Europe. The right is on the rise. And in America, people are being deported. You know, deporting has a very, that's a trigger word for me because my family was deported and they were murdered. And I worked with Latinos in America for 40 years to help them become engaged in our society. I taught English as a second language. And now people are being typed just based on the way they look. And it's the same thing they did to the Jews in Germany. It's all fascism, racism, and anti-Semitism. They're the same thing. Racism and anti-Semitism are two sides of one coin. So Einstein fought it. I think we need to fight it too. Look at, this is some stuff that's happening in the rise of the right. We have threats to peace, democracy, human rights are being taken away. People are being deported. You have fake news, just like Hitler used. Attacks on people who are other than, they look different than us. You blame migrants now. It used to be you blame the Jews. Attacks on anything to do with diversity, inclusion, equity. The poor are losing their health insurance, the medical assistance, food stamps. Anybody who threatens Trump, for example, the Illinois governor, he wants to arrest him, and the mayor of Chicago because they didn't want the troops in Chicago. But I have ICE agents and troops all in my neighborhood arresting people. I have workmen that come to my house. They're afraid to come out because they're afraid they'll be picked up. The rule of law doesn't mean anything anymore. We have book banning, attacks on science, free thought. How is this different from the 30s? So it makes me think about that really famous poem. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak out for me. So I ask you, what will you do? Who will be next? Is it going to be your next door neighbor, your friend? Maybe they'll come for you. What can we do? What would Einstein do? I say we need to work together for democracy. We have to work together, and we need people to rise up. So many people are afraid, and it's impossible to win if you're afraid. You have to be able to take a stand. And so I am asking everybody in every country that's here today to work with me and try to fight against the push to the right. The next generation, my grandkids, are depending on us all. Thank you.
Just I would like to say also in the name of all of us, many thanks to Karen. And it was very impressive and inspiring and also touching. And thank you to open for us the whole story of your family and of your private life, but also to have us making remarkable that it's not private, it's also very social and very linked with politics. So thank you for being here, having been here this evening, for your
heute Abend hier
very
waren.
interesting and
Und
moving
interessanten
lecture,
Vortrag
Karen,
und bewegende
and
Worte
for
gefunden
all
haben.
coming and following you and us this evening.
An
And
alle, die heute Abend
some of you keep in touch,
gekommen
and when we
sind,
can
auch mit
help,
uns
we will do it
folgen.
with
Wir werden in
all
Kontakt
our
bleiben
heart and
und,
our knowledge, if we can.
und hoffen,
And
dass wir
have a good
unser
night.
Herzen und unsere
Thank you. And thank you
mit
for
einbringen
organizing
können.
this, Carmen, and
Vielen
letting me
Dank
be part
an
of
alle.
this wonderful group.